So is it pronounced Heber or Heber?
Heber.
Heber. Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. So where does that name come from? You're the only person I've ever met with that name.
So it's an old biblical derivative of the word Hebrew.
Mm.
And so if you actually look back through Jesus's lineage, in I think Luke, they mentioned the name Heber. And then there was Hebrew, and then there's my family is Mormon LDS, and so there was a lot of the pioneers. One of the more prominent leaders in that community was named Heber C. Kimball, and he is my great great grandfather. So named
Whoa.
after him. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So I'm curious, with the Mormon religion, why is it that the majority of the population, maybe the majority of the population, or at least from what I see, is out in Utah? Because that's where you're from, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Why?
Well, I mean, if we want to get into the history of the Mormon Church, so the church was founded over in the Midwest near Illinois, Palmyra, New York area, so kind of very far east from here. Um, I can't remember what year, but eventually there was enough pushback from the people in those areas. Like there was riots and fights and all kinds of stuff. So eventually, the community, just said, "Hey, we're going to move out of the United States," because the United States didn't extend this far west, and they moved into Mexico. So the pioneers trekked across the future United States from. They left from Illinois all the way over through here to Salt Lake City, Utah, and founded Utah. And then the prophet and leader at the time would send people to establish different cities around the area, knowing that just one city wasn't going to be a strong enough foothold in this part of the world. So he set people down south and up north, and kind of established this general area. And now, years later, there's a ton of population still in the area.
Gotcha. All right, cool. It definitely not the focus was to have you on to talk about the Mormon church religion, but I was curious. So thank you for
That's all
the
right.
thank you for the
Yeah.
quick history lesson there.
Yep.
It is a good transition though, into Running Man, which is where you and I connected. I've been watching the Buttery Bros for a long time, and really grateful that we got to meet up in person down at Running Man. But you guys had some sick footage from the beer mile, which a couple of the Buttery Bros participated in. But you said that you have never drank in your life,
Never had an ounce of alcohol. No.
not one.
Nope. And so Devin Levick, the founder and one of the leaders of the Running Man event, um, he didn't tell me, but someone from there, they emailed me and said, "Hey, participate in this event." And I asked, "Is there any non-alcoholic beer?" And they said, "Yeah, of course." And so then I got there and there wasn't. And Devin's answer was, "We'll just drink." And I was politely declined and said, "No, I think I'm not starting today, but I appreciate the invitation, Devin."
Dude, so you are doing this pretty dope series right now on the Buttery Bros YouTube where you're doing like fittest at 40.
Yep.
So I see you out here setting PRs and all your weights at 40. You're crushing it. You're still in shape. You look great. Do you think that not having alcohol for your whole life has contributed to a lot of the longevity in the sport of CrossFit and in your overall health?
I it's debatable, right? Like there's people that are probably more fit than me that drink and are stronger than me that have drank, but for me, I've just never had a temptation to want to. And I think there's enough data and science behind either restraining alcohol or just completely avoiding it that has insane health benefits. And so I think you could. I don't know that it's. Not, I would say it's probably helped, but I don't think it's making me more fit over time because I've just never had the detriment of not having it. If I drank a lot in my 30s, and now that I'm 40 and I stop, I would probably see an increase in health. But I've never had that downwards sting of drinking that you get from drinking alcohol, so I wouldn't know that part. But I think accumulatively, just continuing to make healthy choices has a compounding effect on your health.
So was that part of your religion or was that just something that you were like, yeah, I'm not gonna go for this?
Probably a combination of both, right? Like, because I was encouraged as a young kid not to drink, and I did have family members going through Alcoholics Anonymous, like, uh, when I was really young, and so I saw the impact of what could happen if you did drink. And I knew pretty young that I have an addictive personality, and I didn't want to take a step down that road. And so I had friends that drank. I've always been around a culture of people that like to party, but I've drawn that line in the sand and haven't crossed it. And I've made mistakes in my life, but that's one that I've been able to keep pretty clean.
How have you been able to resist the temptation towards that and be able to not like separate yourself from that group of friends or those people that you hang out with, like still keep them in your life, but not let alcohol be a like barrier to friendship or connection? Because I feel like in my life, I'm 24 right now and I'm like 6 months into doing a year sober. And I look back and it's like since I've really made health and wellness a priority and a focus in my life, there has been people who I don't hang out with as much, who I'm not as close with, who are, maybe still in my life in some way, but not as prominently as they used to be. And it's like, oh, like they were just a drinking buddy, they were just a friend that you partied with. So how have you been able to kind of navigate those friendships and relationships without letting alcohol be a barrier?
Well, so there's a few things I think with that. That's an interesting question. One, I think none of my relationships and friendships have been built around drinking. And so they've always been built around other things. And then when people want to drink, I don't need alcohol to let my inhibitions down. I don't need my alcohol to be fun and kind of wild. Or like if you go to me and my wife, she doesn't drink. We'll go to weddings and we'll be going hard on the dance floor and people can't believe it. They're like, "How are you 2 that aren't sober out here or that are sober out here going harder than people that are a little bit more loose?" But that's just kinda how we roll. And so we're still able to go out and do those things, but friendships and relationships haven't been built around the necessity of alcohol to let loose because I just try to generally have fun um, have like all I really want to do in life is have a good time, right? Like that's the life goal. And so do it with people I enjoy doing that with. And so I don't feel a need to have alcohol to experience that. And so and none of the people that I interact with do either. And so it's never really been a question and I don't ever feel like I'm missing out. The only thing I'll say is when you order a Diet Coke, it doesn't come nearly in a cool of glass as when you order a beer or a big fancy margarita, right? Like you just don't get that effect. And I'm always like, oh, it'd be cool to have like a fancy glass, but I don't care what's in the glass. This just the glass itself is more fun when it comes with alcohol, I think.
Yeah, dude, I love that mantra that you have in life is like you're just trying to have fun. You're just trying to have a good time. And the vibe that I have always gotten from your content, from the Buttery Bros videos is like you guys are just trying to spread positivity and good energy. And it's inspiring. Like your videos I wouldn't say are with the intent of inspiration. They're with the intent of for me, like this is entertainment, but also like there's an educational piece because for example, like when you guys are going to set your PRs, it's like, hey, here's what we're doing to here's how we're fueling, here's how we're warming up. Like there's a lot of education and entertainment and so much value being distributed through those videos and throughout your content. So you talk back to your early years, have you always been somebody who wants to like create the vibe of a certain situation or a certain scenario? And like how have you taken that and kind of infused it into what you're doing like in life and in business?
I think in general, I've always been pretty optimistic and positive and tried to have a really fun lifestyle. When we started this, so I think what you're referring to here is our Buttery Bros YouTube channel has a very unique feel and energy to it. When we started our YouTube channel, it was really just a way, like it was never our intent to begin it as like we didn't start this is going to be a good business. It was just, hey, let's document the fun that we're having because we were doing other work at the time. And that energy and fun that we're having on camera is basically what we're experiencing in general when we're in the gym, even if there's not a camera on us. And so, like, sure, we might turn up the volume a little bit when we're on camera, but that general aesthetic is what we're experiencing every time I go to the gym. Like, that's my recess as an adult. And so I have so much fun there that it spills over into what we're doing on camera. And I think that sort of just caught fire and people really enjoyed that. And that helped really bring the Buttery Bros into what it is today, which is basically like that's my full-time job. I just wake up and dream of fun things to go do.
Yeah, it's crazy to kind of think about your story too. Is you essentially got your dream job, like running the media for CrossFit. You know, from what I know about you, is like that was like the sport of fitness was something that you were super like interested and intrigued in versus team sport, like basketball or football or things like that. Like you just loved to just get after it in the gym. And so CrossFit, obviously the perfect fit for you. And then getting the opportunity to go and work for them, what was that experience like for you? And then, kind of taking it from there. I know you have an interesting story of being let go from CrossFit and, that ultimately culminating into what the Buttery Bros is today. So would love for you to kind of just talk about your journey and what it was like to get your dream job, excel at it, and then kind of be left in the dust and saying, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, so I'll back you up. It was never a dream job. It was just an opportunity. My dream job when I was getting out of college was my career plan was I want to go make movies in Hollywood. Like I want to go be a film director. I want to direct Mission Impossible 10. Like that's where I want to land. Um, and in high school, in college, I loved all sports. I played basketball, I swam, I ran cross country, I played rugby, I played all kinds of different stuff. And uh, but what I loved about all of them was the training aspect, specifically weightlifting. And so I continued that even when I wasn't playing sports. When I was in college, I was going to the gym every day for at least an hour. I worked at a facility that allowed me to have a free gym membership when I was at a call center when I was in college as well. And when I graduated and I found CrossFit, the ethos of it, the community of it really inspired me. And I thought this is a really cool grassroots company that has a lot of potential. And the sport is like a Rocky movie. And so to get out of Utah, to get closer to LA, I moved to Santa Cruz, California with the thought and expectation that I'll go down to LA and I'll take meetings and I'll do stuff down there regularly. But this will allow me to work at creating media and content and really cut my teeth on that while also potentially having time to do what I really want to do, which is make movies. Flash forward 3 years, I had zero free time there. Like I was working. Literally, there were days within the first year of moving to California where I would be working from 9 a.m. until 3 a.m., driving 45 minutes home, sleeping, and then repeating for an entire month just to create content for a deadline for ESPN. And so, like, I put my heart and soul into that, and for me, it was worth it because I was at that point producing TV shows for this sport that I loved. Um, I realized really quickly after the like 2 years of doing that I don't like creating TV content. That's just not my energy, especially because it looked like it was a live broadcast of an event. I don't like live TV because I don't watch a lot of sports. I was more interested in filmmaking. To CrossFit's credit, they allowed me to turn and start making feature length documentaries, and that was a whole conversation about like what is the value of this content, and it was a whole battle to be able to get them made, and had a lot of pushback, but also a lot of freedom and support. Weirdly, I guess not pushback, but questioning about what I was doing. But ultimately, they trusted me, and I produced 4 documentaries while working for that company. And the popularity of that sport exploded between 2009 when I started working for them and 2018 when I eventually was let go. The A CEO came in, a new one was hired by the owner, and he came in and kind of bulldogged and changed everything that was happening from how the sport was being run, to specifically how media was being created, saying that we're no longer going to be a media company. And in 2013, there was a whole conversation about how, wow, we're now a media company. But now in 2018, we're no longer going to be a media company. We're just going to be a training company. And I was pulled aside at a party and said, "Hey, thank you so much for your feature films. They were so well produced, so well received. They've grown the company too fast in a direction we didn't want it to go. And so now we're making all these drastic changes." And one of those, a few months later, was myself and my business partner now were let go. And we saw that as an opportunity because we saw the success of the content that we had created for that brand. Um, that we could make this our own and own our future and destiny, as opposed to having it be 100% go to this singular individual that is overrunning this entire, not overrunning, but running this company, running that company. And so we started our YouTube channel. We had initial business plans to do other stuff, but within about 4 months, our YouTube completely took over and was way more rewarding and fun, and gave us just a lot more opportunities than I ever dreamed of.
So, how long did it take for you guys to go from getting let go from CrossFit to starting the YouTube channel?
So we were let go in the middle of October of 2018. We shot our very first YouTube episode that was successfully shot. We had attempted some other stuff in December, but January 1st was, if you watch our very first episode, it takes place January 1st in my friend Matt Fraser's garage, and we did one single workout, and we posted it about 2 weeks later, and the next day there was already 10,000 not 10,000. There was maybe 1,000 subscribers the next morning, and like it grew to 20,000 subscribers within a week. Um, and so yeah, I mean that's the time difference between we were let go. We had a successful, semi-successful YouTube channel about 3.5 months later.
So, did when you started it, did you have the intention of this is going to be our full-time thing, or was it more of a side project?
So our plan was we are going to make a documentary about the sport because that year specifically, like we knew CrossFit wasn't going to be doing it. The athletes had really encouraged us to come back and make something on our own. And the whole, basically, like a week after I was let go, I was having calls with, I had a bunch of different career path opportunities come and approach me. And then I also had the initial dream of like, well, I want to go back to Hollywood. So I had multiple meetings down in LA. I had meetings with businesses and finance people that wanted to finance our movie, and ultimately it was going to be. I talked to one of my friends who's a very successful business owner who said, like, why would you, like, if you can figure out a way to own it, because all you're going to do if you sign with a business or a sponsor or um, a finance company is you're going to be giving away part of what you own, and they're going to influence the authenticity of the movie. And I was like, that's very true. And what if we work with the sponsor like this brand, but they don't sponsor this athlete? So I can't feature the one of the best athletes because they're not this, they're not under this umbrella. And so we decided to figure out a way to get around the country and world, because like the very first thing we shot for that documentary was in Dubai. And how are we going to get to these international locations while also financing it, being able to afford hard drives, camera equipment. And our plan was we'll do work for sponsors, but it's going to be commercial work that's very independent for them. And we own the video content regardless of what, like we'll give them stuff, but we own what we shoot. And so that's how we would establish our videos and our productions. And I think we did the Dubai shoot in mid-December, this shoot that got us to Matt Fraser's garage in January. And then we had about a commercial every other week from January through May. And by May, the YouTube had taken off too much where it became detrimental to both parties, the YouTube and commercial work, if we were going to continue doing both. And so I kind of regret not continue to do commercial work and hiring more video people that just worked with under the company. But with the bandwidth I had at that time, it just wasn't sustainable. And so and I didn't want to dilute the quality of what we were doing, so we just went full in on YouTube by May.
Okay, so sounded like from
Sorry, it's a long
Jan
story.
this hey, no, I love that, and I appreciate the detail of it because I it sounds like so from, like, December, January of, like, 2018 to then a couple months later, you were going hard on YouTube, but you were funding it with the money that you had from shooting the commercials for these companies?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. And so from there, you were able to see like, okay, this is just like this thing right here is not forever, like the shooting the ads for the companies, but like there's going to be a lot more longevity in what you're doing with the YouTube channel.
Yeah, it just allowed us to have a lot more freedom, right? So, like, to go to like, we needed to have the freedom to be able to be wherever we wanted regardless of who was gonna be there. And so, like, we spent a lot of money in March, or maybe it was early February, late February, to go to London. Like, we put everything on our credit cards to be there, and I got paid to go to take 2 of us to London. We shared in a, tiny hotel room in the like, this it was an awful, not a great trip. We stayed in this really tiny hotel, uh, and I shot for, um we couldn't get any brands to do commercial work except for one that paid me $800 for some photos and a highlight video. That's not gonna cover the trip, right? And so, having to go back and explain to every brand, like, "Hey, this is what you're gonna get. This is what we're gonna do. You're gonna get your own this, X, Y, and Z." And then we give them a video. And I think the kicker was around the same time in March, we shot this video for Reebok, which was not related to our YouTube. It wasn't related to CrossFit at all. It was a running video about running club that they had built. And we shot this like 15-minute little mini documentary, and they paid us what we're worth at that time to shoot it. And we put it up on their YouTube, on Reebok's YouTube. You can go check it out. And it got like 1,500 views, like not tons. And I explained to them the next week, I was like, look, like, we made this video. It's an awesome video. You enjoy it, but there's not an audience for it. But there are audience. Like, we put out a video on our YouTube channel. And at that time, within a week, we were getting 60,000 views plus. And so I was like, I'll charge you less, but this is what this is going to look like. And they became a sponsor for a little bit. And that's sort of the way that we started to be able to present to brands, look, we can shoot a commercial for you, but where are you going to put it, and where's the exposure going to be? Or we can put it in what we're doing right now that's building something bigger and cooler. And more people are going to be able to be a part of that and see it and want your product as a result of it. And it's way more authentic marketing for you. Um, and so that when I started to see that in March and April, the goal was always to be done with commercial work as quickly as possible so that we could be able to just focus on this, because it was a win for all parties involved at that time.
What was going through your head during those times of maxing out credit cards, betting on yourself, like putting everything you have up on this dream and on this vision, yet still having to give yourself enough creative slack and energy to be able to actually come up with these ideas and shoot and film and edit and produce all these things? Because one thing that I've realized throughout my entrepreneurial journey as a creator is like if you're constantly being weighed down by like the next thing that you have to do, or like you feel like your back is always at against the wall, like I feel like there is a I feel like there is a lot of benefits in that, you know, like pressure makes diamonds and all that. But I also have realized like when there's so many things on your plate of like the things that you have to do, it's hard to have that creative energy to come up with new ideas or concepts or collaborations or whatever else it is. So what was going through your head during that time of having to produce and execute, but also like, man, like we gotta make money here too.
I mean, yeah, it's rough. Like, I'm the only one of the so there's me and my business partner Marsden, and then we have another guy that has been with us basically since April of that year. Julian, who does a lot of work with us, who's at Running Man. Um, I'm the only one with kids, right? I'm the only one with a wife, and the only one that's had a relationship with either for the entirety of the Buttery Bros. and so for me, like I have that responsibility, and then I have the responsibility of also generating enough revenue to be able to pay for all of us to have a life. And when we were starting in March, like I had to ask help from family to pay rent while living in California, and um, I saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be successful. That I mean, obviously, it could fail. It could have failed in April, but in at that point, I was like, I see the money that's coming. I see the what could potentially come of this. I'm putting all my chips in, and to take some of that financial pressure on, I actually moved as a guy in his mid 30s with a wife and two kids into my parents' basement for a year, and because I didn't want financials to be uh, uh, a reason to not do something that was of value for our channel and for like our life in general too, right? Like we had opportunities to go to Aruba and Hawaii that year. And I was like, I don't want, because we couldn't afford it, to like, I want to go to Aruba in my lifetime. I want to go to Hawaii at some point in my life and do really cool things. Um, and I think there's going to be an audience for it when we do it. We just got to do it, and we got to do it right. And and so I basically saw that as an investment and a way to pull stress off of myself and protect my family by putting us in a position where regardless of we win or fail, I can ride this because I believe in it. And if it does fail, the worst case scenario, I just go back to doing commercial work. Best case scenario, I have the most amount of freedom I could ever experience in my life. And I'll tell you now, like we've been doing this for over 5 years, I still feel like my back's up against the wall. I'd never that never goes away. But the difference is you just have confidence. And I think because I did so much work in this space before I started on my own, I've always had the confidence that there's going to be an audience if I just continue to make something that I personally would enjoy and watch. And that's always been the barometer of what kind of content I want to create is if I saw this thumbnail, if I saw this title and I saw this energy in it, would I watch it? And would I come back and watch the next one? And that's always been whenever I'm editing, if there's jokes, if there's storylines, if there's things in there, is it something that I enjoy? And then on occasion, I like to have other people watch it and give feedback, of course, and which is why we have a few people that help us with our editing, and that's a whole different story. But um, the feeling of having your back against the wall is always going to be there. It's just having the confidence to know that what you're creating is going to be cool enough that there will be an audience to support it.
Hmm. In what ways have you been able to build that confidence muscle for yourself too?
I think it's something that I've always had just because I've been creating videos since I was 8, right? Like I've done this for a really long time. I did it a lot in high school, and then especially when doing content for CrossFit, like I created hundreds of videos. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it's hundreds. But I created hundreds of hours of content for them and saw what was working and saw what wasn't, and was able to anytime I put out a video, it would do more successful on average than the general it would do more successful on average than what else was put out on their YouTube channel. And I could see when it wasn't doing that, and I could see very much when it was. And it's a there's a recipe there that is very niche for that audience, but I understand it very well. And figuring out that for outside of for outside and general population views is different, and that's still something that we're working on today. So I'm very confident in this niche, and then figuring out how to be more confident outside of it.
Yeah, how have you been able to separate yourself and your team as a whole in fitness, which is such a sat people say, "Oh, it's such a saturated market. It's such a saturated thing," which yes is true, but I think what you guys have done well is create this like unique aura and ethos and kind of just feel around your guys' brand. So, how have you been able to really separate yourself from other channels or other creators or other people that are out there creating content in around similar things?
So it's interesting because we're in fitness, but we're not in a way. And I want to be more in a broader fitness spectrum, because we're in fitness, but we're very much in the niche of CrossFit. But we work very hard to be um, appealing to people outside of that space. And that's something we've done since the beginning. And that's been part of the Buttery Bros ethos from the beginning, both because I think the style of CrossFit training is arguably I think it's the best way to train for longevity if you're doing it correctly. If you're not, it can be detrimental, but that's the same with anything. If you're not running correctly, that can be detrimental to your knees in years. If you're not um, skiing correctly, that could be very detrimental to your knees. Like any physical activity can hurt you if you're not doing it right. I think CrossFit is an awesome way to train, but I understand that it's not appealing to everybody, and not everyone wants to get there. And so to make it, um, not because I'm marketing CrossFit, but also because I'm interested in other things outside of just what is deemed that. We try to include everything, because I think when you're doing that, all things rise. If I'm doing CrossFit and I have a strongman on there, their audience sees this and they might be excited about it, and my audience might see things that the strongmen are doing and learn from that as well. And so there's a lot of cross pollination that we've worked really hard to develop through the Buttery Bros. Um, but so we're in this niche of fitness that you're saying is saturated, but I don't feel like it is. I feel very much that there's room for more. There's lots of, I think, a younger generation. I think you're a decade younger than me or more. Um, that generation that's just getting out of college is very interested in fitness and very interested in social media. So I feel like there's a level of, yeah, that might be saturated, but there's so many people on earth that don't work out, that obesity is on the rise. That's a problem. It's not something I like worry about regularly, because I'm interacting with so many people that aren't diabetic or aren't overweight. But there's so many people that I want to inspire to get in the gym that aren't there, that there could be 30 people doing what we're doing, and not we still wouldn't make a dent in what's happening on a global scale. And that's where my mind is how do we get an extra 5% of the population working out, not worrying about the 1% that are at the time.
That is really interesting, and I love that you tapped into that because there's a broader mission, like, there's a greater message behind, like, what you guys are doing. Yes, you wanna, inspire, entertain, educate people through your content, but in reality, it's like health and wellness and just being fit and being healthy has had such an impact on your life. Like, you can see it in the way that you guys live. Like, it's not an act. Like, you guys are generally just out there vibing, enjoying everything that you do. And if those videos can help more people experience that joy and love and abundance in life, then that is ultimately a win. So I love that you were able to touch on that. I wanted to jump back a sec to something you said. You said CrossFit, you believe, is the most optimal way to train for longevity if you're doing it right. And that was where I was like, okay, there it is. Because my mom is a physical therapist and she would have CrossFitters coming into her office just absolutely wrecked from probably overtraining, under recovering, not having the proper mobility and movement quality of things. So when you say doing it the right way, like, what are the principles or the core pillars to doing CrossFit in the right way?
But I'm not going to speak for CrossFit specifically, but I'll say from my experience, and I think PTs get an interesting perspective on CrossFit, because they see the people that are doing CrossFit that are overusing muscles and probably training incorrectly, and therefore they need to go to PT. Um, I see CrossFit as PT. So if I injure my arm, if I pull a muscle in my lat doing something, I'm going to be doing CrossFit to rehab it. But my needs have changed. I'm no longer needing to try and pull 100 pounds more than my body weight up on a pull-up bar. My needs are now to rehab my arm, and my degree has changed, but the movement is still the same. Meaning that I'm not going to add weight to my pull, but I'm going to pull and I'm going to lighten the load. But the way to get mobility back is to continue to use that range of motion, but maybe you use a band so that it's lighter as opposed to adding weight. Um, and so one of the biggest things you'll hear on our channel specifically is scaling for life, because I want to be able to have functional as much functionality as possible for as long as possible. And at its core, that's what CrossFit's ethos and message is. And that kind of gets lost when people are excited. And it's very easy to do this. And there's no blame for anyone for doing this, because I've done it for years, which is you go into the gym, you see what's on the whiteboard, you see your buddy and you're competitive with him. And you're like, well, I need to beat him doing the same workout. And so I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't do, because then on paper on the whiteboard at the end of today, I've beaten John at X, Y, and Z. But I've been able to shift that goal of like, I don't care what's on the whiteboard today. I care what I'm able to do when I'm 80. I care what I'm able to do when I have my great grandkids running around me, and can I lift them up, and can I still go ski with them? And so that sometimes means I have to pull back and do things that are more appropriate for where I'm at on today's level. But looking at it as a very 1,000-foot view or 10,000-foot view of a life, because if you're caught up in what my max, and this is interesting because you were talking about my PR deadlifts earlier, and there's a whole story behind that. But the um, trying to do things at a maximal and high intensity all the time can be detrimental to a longer term life of health. And so um, CrossFit's goal and their definition of fitness is work capacity across broad time and modal domains, which means you're functional at many things for as long as possible. And so you want to train everything, but that doesn't mean you need to be fully functional and as best as possible at everything right now. It just means to be training those things so that you can do them when they're necessary.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so I think someone like a PT that's seen people come in injured, you're dealing with people that are ego lifting or one other note on that is, and I just saw this the other day, which is they talk about how you need to be, CrossFit has, I forget their phrase, but something about intensity. And the intensity, I think, for people can be relative, where my intensity today might not be what it is tomorrow. And I need to be to scale that appropriately for what the task is at hand.
Mm. One thing I really admire about you is how you've been able to prioritize your health and fitness and your wellness while also making family a priority. I love hearing about the like the dad and son days that you guys do where they get to pick an activity and then you take them and you do back squats and then you go and eat pancakes or so some of the fun things that you guys get to do. So for you, how have you been able to design your days and prioritize the things that are most important to you while also, pursuing your dreams and honoring the obligations that you have, like creating content on a weekly basis?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's not easy. And there's a lot of times the way we've set up what we do, it requires a lot of travel. And so I'm constantly traveling. I haven't actually had to travel for a bunch of weeks right now, and won't until mid-January. So this is the longest I've been home, which is fascinating. Um, but it's for me, there's a lot of um I don't have a regular schedule. I don't think I've ever done well with a regular schedule. I love the freedom of waking up and being like, okay, I'm actually really interested in this today, and that's what I'm going to dive into, and I'm going to give it my full effort. Um, or I need to do this, and so I have to kind of cancel everything else because I have to sit down and edit for 24 hours straight, or whatever it is that's required of me. Balancing my work and my family time is difficult, but I've found that um, the best things I can do is create situations that generate core memories with them. And whether that's that you were referencing our due days where I let them pick one or two activities and then I pick an activity and we kind of cycle through. And we have, you know, that one we did was we woke up, we had pancakes. I did a cold plunge and they were hanging out with me while I was in there. And then we went to the local trampoline park, and then we came back home and we did back squats, and then we went to pizza and video games that night. And so, and that's just one. Another one was we just kind of rolled with whatever they wanted to do, and we ended up on top of a mountain after eating hamburgers and ice cream, and that was a fun memory as well that we have. But I also try to include them on our show once a quarter or twice a year at least, where we're going out and we're doing really cool things that I can document and have on the show and have for us to remember forever. As well as then when I'm at home, I try to make sure that I help get them to school, and then at night help get them to bed and have dinner with them and interact with them on a very one-on-one level regularly. Um, like lately, since I haven't been traveling, it's been great. We've once a week we'll have my wife will take one kid and I'll take another kid and we'll go do our own little date night with just the kids. And so I get great one-on-one time with, like, last night I went with Finley and we had pizza, and then we went and did some Christmas shopping together, and then we came home and played video games, and that was like a really fun night and um bonding time for me and my kid.
Mm. How have you been able to create those boundaries for yourself where the work is never really done? Like there's always more that you could be doing, but being able to shut it off and, create boundaries around family time, around work time, around time where you're in the gym, and, just making sure that you're able to pour into whatever bucket that you're presently in.
Yeah, it depends on what bucket you're prioritizing. So there's times where, like, sleep is the priority, which sounds weird, but, like, I'm gonna perform better on all levels if I sleep, because there's times where sleep is very much not going to be the priority. And then there's non-negotiables, like, every day I'm gonna go to the gym, like, that's not a question. That's just going to happen. And I plan my day around, okay, what point when how do I go to the gym? Is the gym today going to be my reward? And so I sit down and I work, and um, it's I reward myself for the amount of stuff that I've done. So if I get done early, I can be there longer. Or there's going to be a point where it's like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm The laptop's off. I'm going to the gym, and for 90 minutes at least, I'm shutting out everything else. Some of the problem with that though is oftentimes, like yesterday, I was able to go to the gym in the morning and do some work, come home, got a bunch of stuff done, ran some errands, and went back to the gym with a 60-minute window where I had some lifting I had to get done. But that turned into a meeting with my me and my business partner, and instead of doing 40 cleans, I did 2, and I was like, "Well, I gotta go on my date with my son, and that's a bigger priority for me right now, and so that bucket is more important." But I took care of my need to work out earlier that day, so it didn't end up being a problem, and I have time today to shift it around. Um, but for me, making sure that I have, even if I have a lot of work to do at a computer, making sure that every day, especially making sure every day I dedicate time to fill my bucket and those closest to me. And that's myself with the gym, and then my wife, getting some one-on-one time with her, and the kids. And so if I'm on a huge edit night, I'll take an hour, where I go up and I read with the kids. I put them down. I'll hang out with my wife for 30 minutes to an hour, and then I go back and I'm at my computer from 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. And I'm okay with that because I know I'm not that sleep's not the bucket today. Editing is, and that needs to get done. And so I'm pretty good at juggling all those things. My wife might think differently, but uh, definitely putting a priority on what is necessary when, and knowing that if I take care of going to the gym, entertaining my family, and being present with my kids, I will actually produce better content, is something that I have to remind myself. And um, doing this for years, I know when I'm going to perform best, and it's after I've done those two things.
Do you have any practices or tricks or things that you do to shift from one thing to the next? I know for me, like, if I need to have a reset, I will, like, go take a shower and change my clothes. Like, I might not even need to do that at all, but, like, for me to just, like, kinda go from one thing to the next, I'll do that, or I'll go and get in the cold plunge and just, like, if I need a jolt of energy before afternoon meetings or whatnot. So, like, there's certain ways where I found, like, okay, rather than just trying to push this brick wall over, like, how do I maneuver my way around it? So, do you have any ways where you're able to shift from, like, dad mode into work mode, or, like, producer mode into husband mode, or anything like that?
Oftentimes, I don't have time for it. I'm just like, I gotta be here and I'm there. And mainly that's probably poor planning on my part, just because I jam so much into my day that I'm like, I don't have time to do this. When I have the time, like before I hopped on this podcast, I plunged and drank some morning collagen protein. Um, when I have the time, plunge is definitely something I love to do. Sauna and plunging, if I have more time, is something I love to do. But really, it's if I have to dive into something, I put my phone away and then I try to be 100% present as best as I possibly can for whatever task is necessary. And then um, uh, headphones too, if I need them. Like if it's working or if I'm at the gym, headphones are the easiest way for me to dial in and also to let people around me know, like, hey, I'm focused on this right now. I don't, there's a reason these are in. I don't want to hear you right now. As rude as that sounds, but sometimes that's necessary when you're uh, trying to get in a workout and people also want to be social.
You ever put your headphones in at the gym and just not listen to anything? You can hear the music from the gym?
No, I definitely am a huge fan of music and love being inspired by whatever rhythm I'm getting, and so I'm never doing that. At times, if anything, I'll have one headphone in playing music, and then my other ear listening to whatever else is going on. If I'm trying to have conversations mid workout.
Gotcha. I've been in some gyms where it's very loud, so, like, you're already like, your music would be drowned out anyway, and I'm just like, "I'm just gonna put these in because I don't feel like talking to anybody today." So,
Yeah.
there's definitely times where I've done that. I'm curious on your process, from the creation process, because you guys are not just producing like a 5 to 10 minute video every week. You're doing a full length production, like, 20 to 40 minutes, and they're highly edited. They're very well done. So, how far ahead are you looking at, like, the content calendar, and then also managing short form and putting that content out there to, just create more awareness and drive that to the YouTube channel? So, how have you guys gone from, like, an operational standpoint to be able to really remain creative and not feel like you're um, playing catch up?
No, we always feel like we're playing catch up is the
Okay.
first thing. Okay, so
Yeah, I'm not,
first off,
I'm not,
always
I'm
playing
not
for
the
catch up.
only one. I'm not the only one.
No,
Okay.
it's never well, because we started in 2019 and that whole year it was like, is this gonna work? Is this gonna work? We have to do this. Okay, well, now we've done, January through August, and there's kind of a lull in the season after that. Um, and we have to now edit this documentary that we've shot. And so we've always had a free ish schedule. Like we have a shoot tomorrow. It's Tuesday, right? We have a shoot tomorrow, and we have two ideas of what we're going to do. We might do one, we might do the other. Um, but like beyond that, I know in January there's an event that we're going to go to here, and then we have just kind of a rough outline of things that we want to do at different places. But because we started with just kind of going whenever and wherever we could to get the best story for that time that was present. It's not as organized as other YouTube channels where like they've come up with the concept and the thumbnail and they're going to go shoot it and this is their kind of story before they get there. Oftentimes it's like, hey, we have this opportunity with this athlete, we're going to go there. They're having a training camp, so there's four of them. We don't know what the story is exactly, but we'll get there and we'll figure it out. And we do really well with that kind of like loose operational schedule. Um, Also, what happened during all of this is we actually did have a really good plan. In February of 2020, we had the entire like 7 months of that season planned out from February through like September. And then, the world went into a pandemic and all of our plans went out the window and we had to pivot. And again, we figured out a really interesting working schedule that allowed us to be very successful during that downward spiral of the world. So we've kind of continued in that trend. We're now getting to a place where, like, we have this Fittest at 40 series where I have, an idea of what I want to shoot, a few of my goals, and those I kind of have to just sort of plan out because I have to plan out how my training is going to affect those. Um, then beyond that, it's figuring out what is happening, who's going to be where, what's going to be interesting, and what's going to be the best content, and also balancing that between conceptual ideas of videos that are going to be more evergreen and more successful long term. I would hope that aren't necessarily like some of the the most viewed things that we put on our YouTube channel this year have been from events. So, like, what happened at the 2023 CrossFit Games? That's our biggest video. Or, that's not the title of it, but that's eventually essentially what that video is. And that video has probably 500,000 views right now. Um, but, like, who's gonna care about the 2023 CrossFit Games in 2028, right? Like, who's gonna go back and watch that? There will be a small amount of people that will, but it's not as evergreen as, 5 tips to start your gym experience when you're overweight. Like, that's something that is much more lasting, and so figuring out what those are that we can produce regularly and grow that kind of content is a goal of ours. But we're always figuring out what's gonna be the best to do for our community, and oftentimes that's just waiting for opportunities to come up. And then also 50-50 between waiting for opportunities and generating our own opportunities. And essentially the main focus for our creative level, which is essentially what your question was, is creating content for the YouTube first. So long form first is all we're worried about, because I think YouTube is the longest um, uh, state has been the most stable platform over the last decade or longer. Instagram has been very popular from like 2014 to 2019, and TikTok sort of taken over. We're not big on there. YouTube now has shorts, but figuring out what our long form content on YouTube is, and then from there splicing down promotional short form content that can either push people to that show on YouTube or be its own standalone thing. And then after that comes other short form content that's just specific to Instagram Reels or TikTok. Like, okay, we're going to shoot this, we're going to flip the camera vertically, and we're going to shoot this with only the intent that it's going to live on an iPhone, and that's the only place you're ever going to see it. And those are important, and for some creators, that's the most important thing, which I totally get. But for us, our goal is to create really cool long form content, because we got in that path. We never saw ourselves initially as YouTubers. We saw ourselves as filmmakers and content and storytellers, and then sort of just eventually became YouTubers. But I think YouTube has caught up with that quality and with that level of production, that it's been a really beautiful place for us to put our and release our content.
Yeah, and just knowing where your priorities lie as a creator too, I think is very important for myself. The more that I've focused on like, hey, what's my mission or what's my focus as a creator right now? And then everything else kind of just supports that. But if you're trying to put equal energy into everything, you're going to end up missing versus just putting your effort and energy into one platform. So I love to hear that. I am curious. So we've talked about a little bit about faith and religion in the beginning of this podcast, but what role has that played for you in your life and in your journey as a creator, as an entrepreneur, and then now as a father, as a husband, and ultimately like where you're going in life?
Faith, I mean, that's the driving factor between everything, right? And so figuring out what, like you talk about your mission for your creative goals, but also figuring out what your life goals are. And whether you have faith in God or not, like figuring out what you want to do and be 10 years down the road is a really important question. And for me, faith is a driving factor for that. And family being another really big one. And I want to build a life for myself that I would be proud of when I'm 80. I want to build a life for myself that my kids are proud of and happy with, but not spoil them, right? Like, I want them to learn and grow and be stronger and healthier and be a better contributing human to Earth, um, and leave not just a legacy for myself, but leave this planet better than when I came, by whatever impact I can have. Um, I think you can use faith to give you direction there. I do. Um, or you can just use whatever moral compass you have. But for me, it's been a moral compass It's an easy way to have life lessons and to learn from other people's mistakes through what stories you read in either the Bible or, for me, the Book of Mormon as well. And also listening to people um, that have a different perspective, that are giving you information and direction on life. And whether I don't agree with everything I ever hear from a pulpit, but I have learned to distill what is going to impact me. And so I try to, anytime someone's speaking, I try not to get too emotionally invested in it, but take it for what it is at face value, and then instill in my life the things that I think are valuable. And so um I think for anyone that is looking at faith and how do you use this to grow, there's so much value in putting hope and growing something that you don't necessarily see the end result or know for a fact is 100% real. You're That's what faith is, right? Like, you're believing in something that you can't necessarily prove. You just trust that it's going to work. And that, for me, learning that from religion and then and then applying that into other aspects of my life has allowed me to be where I am today.
That's beautifully said, man. I got one more question before I give you the final question, and that is, if you had no monetary restriction, no time restriction, like, take all of those factors out of it, what would be your dream project or the dream video that you'd want to create?
I don't know, because that's always changing. Like, I feel like I'm doing my dream videos, but just at like a percentage. Sorry, percentage of what they could be because of monetary restrictions. Um, I think every video would be different because, I'm really excited about this and I'm really excited about this. And so there would be a combination, and we're doing this right now, which there's a combination of travel videos to training day videos to, like, our last two episodes have been like a reality TV show challenge videos where we have 10 of the best athletes in the sport of CrossFit going head to head in different stupid challenges like flip cup. Um, and I love those. I love all of those three different kind of genres that I just described there. And so just doing those on a bigger scale, like, I would have loved the reality TV show to be shot over the course of 2 days and have better lights set up and a little bit more professional. But it works because we're not that too. You know what I mean? Like, there's a nice balance between being almost too professional where people aren't genuine in themselves because there's lights and there's things and they get intimidated by that. Um, and so yeah, it's an interesting balance between, yeah, I would love to do that, but is that actually going to be hurtful to the content and the authenticity of what we're creating? Um, so I think doing more, if money wasn't an issue, I would be doing a little bit more travel videos where, like, one of my favorite videos we did last year was heli skiing in Japan. Like, that was a bucket list thing. And so I think, rather than doing something like that once a year, that would become a quarterly thing as opposed to once a year, if that. But that's
Amazing.
really all I would change. Yeah.
Love it. So my last question for you is a question I ask all my guests, and that is that this is the Pure Ambition podcast. So when you hear those two words, pure ambition, what do they mean to you, and how does it apply to your daily life?
I think it's really just distilling down. So there's a few different things that come to mind when I hear pure ambition. Um, it's clearing your head of things that aren't part of what you want and focusing, distilling everything down to what is the goal. And there's things that might seem like the goal, but they're not, and they can distract you from what what you're trying to do. And then there's also the other idea that comes to my mind when I hear pure ambition is being over, like, setting your sights so high that it's overly ambitious. Like, it's too, like, for most people, I don't think that they would say, I don't think that you could do that. I don't think that that's possible. But I'm so ambitious that it's possible, and even if it's not, I'm gonna get closer than others, and I'm okay with that. But being so ambitious that it's almost dangerous is a way I'd put it.
Teetering with the line, redlining with
Yeah.
it. I love
Yeah.
it. Dude, this was a blast. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for all the wisdom, knowledge, and insight that you dropped. If people want to check out more of your content or they want to connect with you, where are you hanging out at?
They can find us on YouTube at Buttery Bros. You can find us on Instagram at Buttery Bros, or my personal Instagram is Heber Cannon, at Heber Cannon. And I'm on there fairly often. You can DM me or hit me there.
Amazing. Appreciate you, bro.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on, Dom.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.